Hi, everybody. My name's Caleb Reed. I am here with Donna Reed today. Uh, I am from casts A and B of 2013, and I wanted to interview Donna for the 50th episode of the Cactus Lounge, right? So, hello, Donna.
Hello, Caleb.
How are you today? I'm realizing I'm changing my name because it has my work name. There we go. Um,
But I also find it amusing that you've called me Donna 3 times.
well, yeah. I
I
mean,
know.
I'm a professional.
Okay, there
Uh,
you go.
so acknowledging it, I am Donna's son. Hi, Mom.
Hi.
And we wanted to make a special episode for the 50th episode. So I'm interviewing her today, so you can finally get to know more about the woman behind the camera.
Behind the camera, on the camera, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So, Mom, just start. When did you travel? Where were you from when you joined up with people?
It's from Northwest Ohio, tiny little town, Lindsay. And it was the fall of 75 when I saw a show. And so then traveled in the summer of 76. They were in the middle of the bicentennial tour, and then we continued the bicentennial tour.
The bicentennial is the 200th birthday of the United States.
Thank you for saying that.
International
Yeah.
folk.
Yeah.
Our hometown is really small. So where did you see the show?
The show was actually in Fremont, Ohio. They performed what was then the junior high. It was called the middle school, I think, when you went there. And we housed the PR team at our house, which is how I really learned about it, because the PR team stayed at our house in Lindsay. And it was fall. It was early in their tour. It was, I don't know, September, October. So it gave me most of a year to raise money.
In the 2010s, the PR team would be at a town for like 4 or 5 weeks, I think. How long was it back then?
I would say probably at least 3 weeks. I'm not 100%
Okay.
sure, but those poor kids that were in Ohio performed at every flippin' town in Ohio. They didn't think they'd ever get out of Ohio.
Did you interview with the PRs who were staying with you, or did you interview with someone else? And if so, do you remember
No,
who it was?
yeah, I do. I interviewed with Bruce Harris, who was from Dorset, England, I believe. And I may or may not have mentioned this in some other episodes. They asked what languages we spoke. He asked what languages we spoke. And I said I had 17 years of English, and he was American, my dear, not English. Yeah.
I hope he watches this episode.
Well, sadly, Bruce is deceased. But yes, but I'll never forget it. And anybody that knows him could picture him doing that. And then Dale Penny was the cast director. So then my second interview was with Dale.
Wow. And then his son was mine.
Oh, I didn't know he was.
In the office, in the main office, not on the road.
Oh, okay.
So cast
Wow.
manager? I don't know.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. What was up with people for you? What was about it that led you to do this 40 years later?
I wish I could go back into my mind at that point and see why I thought I wanted to do it. I liked music, but I hadn't specifically sung a lot. My mom and dad traveled kind of a lot for that time because dad would win trips related to selling insurance. So unlike many, many people in that little town who at that point didn't travel a lot, mom
Still?
and dad, yeah, but way more than they used to. But that, mom and dad had been to Hawaii and to Spain and Portugal and Hong Kong and, places. So, and my grandfather was a huge traveler. So I have to say that was definitely a big piece of it. And to be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. So what the heck?
So when they stayed with you, was it like an immediate, like, oh, I want to do that now, and this is the next step? Was it that quick?
A little bit, yeah, because I don't know if you know this. I was interviewing for ROTC scholarships in the military, just like my brothers. And yeah.
I can't imagine you in the military, but okay.
No, neither could my brothers. So I had been to Cleveland and was kind of a finalist for a Navy ROTC scholarship. And literally, Caleb, if I reread my diary, one day it was Navy, the next day it was up with people. I never talked about the military.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what did you when you went into it, what were you expecting to happen? Like what was the intention behind joining? What did you expect to get out of it? It's a
You
weird
know,
question, but
it,
like
it, it
what was the plan?
yeah, it's a hard question. I think for me, I wanted to see the world. I guess I always did. I talk to young people who are so service oriented and like that's why they went in. And to be honest, I can't say that that was the case for me. I just thought, oh, I can get out of Lindsay, Ohio and go other places and see what the world is like in other places. And not even thinking about the bicentennial and the fact that we were going to spend a whole lot of time in the United States.
You got to go to Mexico as well, right?
Yeah, but Caleb, so when we traveled and you didn't know who you were going to be within your cast, when you traveled, you all did. But there was a big board and they put your names up on these,
They
paper.
still do that. They just take a photo of it and post it on the Facebook group in advance.
Oh. Okay, that doesn't happen with us. So you didn't know what group you were going to be in. You were in rehearsals and doing things, and then you would go and you would find out what cast you were going to be in. And
was that to diversify like singers and dancers and
I'm
other
guessing,
types of people? Okay.
I would guess, because at that point they already had pinpointed who were some singers, who were some dancers and things like that. And maybe age, maybe, I had just turned 18 5 or 6 days before I left. So yeah, very different than your experience, right?
Yeah.
And we and then we looked, and there was like a group going to Canada, there was a group going to Venezuela, and we were like, oh, Mexico, that'll be fun.
I love Mexico.
No,
what a great place to travel.
And that, the end of the story after that is that you remember the experiences as much as the places. And we had a blast in Mexico, and I love Mexico, right? And I've been back. But at that point, you're like, well, it's not Norway.
Right.
Yeah.
When you were looking at this, you said ROTC maybe for college, but were gap years a thing?
Not really. No.
It's much more of an industry nowadays of encouraging kids to do something, and then this is how they do it. So I can imagine if it was less common, there's not a lot of options for gap year. You want to travel? Here's the first one you saw.
Absolutely. It was very much that way. And I think that I always felt like I should go to college, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. If you ask Uncle Dan, he would say she still doesn't know what she wants to do, but that's getting better. It's only taken 45 or 50 years. But for me, the idea, we'd been to Chicago because my mom was from Chicago, and we'd been to the farm because my dad grew up on a farm, and
in Ohio.
In Ohio, yep. But
we had
inner city experience, and a lot of people hadn't already. But I think that for me, I didn't really have any idea what I was getting into. I came from a family where mom and dad were married, where we all got good grades, where we got along, where I just thought everybody was going to be that. Dang.
Life has changed. That's a different podcast episode.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a good thing. I don't know if part of the interview is me recommending a book, but I just finished a book called Range, which is a really in-depth look into people who know what they want to do and study one thing forever versus experiencing many things and becoming proficient at the thing you land on after trial and error, basically. It's a much more in-depth book than that, and it's wonderful. I recommend everybody read it. It's called Range. It was recommended to me by someone who I had commented that I didn't know what I was good at. I'm good at a lot of things, but not great at anything. He's like, oh, you feel bad about that? You should be proud. So for what it's worth.
And Diane, one of my elementary school friends, she was a candy striper. She knew she was going to be a nurse.
What is that?
They helped in the hospitals, and they wore cute little dresses, and I don't know what they delivered.
And why were they called candy stripers? I've heard the term for years.
I don't know. That's a great question.
That's got to be an international thing where people are like, what are you talking about?
Right. They probably had cute little uniforms that were stripy.
I think of the 50s. I think of like soda shop outfits.
Yeah, it kind of looked a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to Up With People. You get on the road.
Yeah.
What were your costumes like? Who were your friends? What are your experiences that you remember vividly?
So it was a huge, we, Roxanne and I called ourselves the orange polyester backdrop. So the colors were green and yellow and orange. And then we had scarves that were striped that were an opposite color. The yellows had short sleeves, the green had long sleeves, and the oranges had kind of a flary sleeve, which was super nice since polyester was double knit was very hot. So we
This is
were,
not a thing I'm aware of, but clearly
yeah.
it makes a difference, right? Like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And our shoes were Tom McCann shoes that were dyed the colors of our dresses. And so I had orange shoes. Um,
what
and
department did you help with?
well,
What department of this?
I helped with costumes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
clearly
Which is,
have that kind of view of things a little bit, which because you
that's
were
true.
involved. I don't know what shoes my
Mhm.
costume was, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and some people still have them and some people still fit in them. I don't know how that works, but they, yeah, that was our costume. So entirely different than right now. This morning I interviewed somebody else and I didn't think to ask her about the costumes, but she was in the early 2000s. So,
it's my year
yeah,
2013, and I think it's still similar. Is here's a color palette, bring clothes of this style in that color palette, and then you're kind of assigned like, oh, you brought 3 shirts, but we want you to wear that red shirt, and you wear that the whole time or
right.
whatever. I imagine it's probably similar to that, at
Yep.
least before the temporary closure. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I think it is.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, it's got to
Yep.
be similar.
Yep.
Um, Fun experiences, fun stories. Or
Man,
do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite
I,
story?
I wasn't quite ready for that. It's funny.
It's on your list of
On
questions.
my list of questions. I was thinking about things that I do remember that I got to do. One of my host families in Idaho was a safety engineer in a silver mine. So my roommate and I got to go down inside a silver mine. And I was thinking about this related to you and your experiences that you had shared, up on the reservation and stuff. And so that was crazy unique. We performed with Helen Reddy and Mac Davis, like they were at the
Who are
Colorado
they?
State. Who were they? I'm
I'm
sorry.
interviewing you for people who don't know.
That's true. Not They are now deceased artists that were at the Colorado State Fair. But
Musician, artist, or like
yes,
painters? Okay.
musician artists. Helen Reddy is known for "I Am Woman." You'll have to look that up sometime, son, if you haven't heard it before.
I'm trying
And
to help the audience.
I get it. I get it. For the if young people listen to this, they know
Yep.
what I'm talking about. I think for me, and this is not really an answer to your question, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Mhm.
And I may have mentioned this to you after your first reunion. You join this group, you immediately connect with certain people. And again, 18-year-old coming in, and I'm just going to call out Zanalotti because, he was 22 or 23. He'd grown up in a city. Everything we did, Tony would say, I already did that. I already did that. And I was like, you can't have done all that. Well, 5 years older and
You
in a
can
big
have.
city, he can have done all that stuff, right? He had lived a whole different life. And I think that was the piece that surprised me. And that some of the people who were my closest friends in Tucson and staging, I'm not in touch with. And other people who show up every year to every reunion who I was not necessarily close to, because when you're 17 and 23 or 17 and 24, that age gap is hugely different.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter at all now. And they're some of
The
my
magi-
closest friends.
and my closest friends for the audience, I was 26, turning 27 on the road, and my closest friends in Denver now were kind of staff members for me. So
Yeah.
or they're in Europe, but I a slightly older group of people. Yeah. So that's a
Yes.
great kind of segue into how did you keep in touch? Because you
Ooh.
are, as a person who knows you, you are well regarded amongst your cast as the person who kept people in touch. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, you're right. So there was a woman here in Tucson, Ellen, who kind of was in the very beginning. And I we wrote letters. We had the hard copy binders, we had phone trees, people had to update things. This is so foreign to everybody now. There's, and because we have 10 ways to contact each other. And so I just did that. I was not at the 5-year reunion. That was because your dad and I had, your dad and I had just gotten married. Grant had just been born, and we were just moving to Ohio. So,
you had just left Tucson, where the reunion was.
Just left Tucson. I know, isn't that weird? And so, but then I'd been at every reunion since, and I don't know, for some reason, the friends that I've made here have lived an experience that nobody else has lived. And
you mean
that matters.
Alumni in Tucson?
Alumni in general.
People who stayed in Tucson and kind of
not even
around, or
not even in Tucson, the Rettas, the Beths, the, Ann Fredrickson that worked at the ranch with me. And, those people who spent maybe a lot of years and up with people, and maybe just one, but who value the relationships through the years. And it's work. You got to choose to do it. It's part of the reason that I have done this, because it matters to me.
That's the second part of this question. So after having written letters to seemingly everybody for a long time, and then social media making it easier, and email making it easier before that, why are you doing this? What prompted this?
I'm going to add something to what you just said. After a while too, people would say, well, what about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? And I'm sort of this, for 40 years, we've tried to find so-and-so. If they want to be found, they'll be found. I don't look anymore with all the ways that we could find each other. And there are people.
You can Google names.
Right. But with women, you don't know. You don't know if they
true.
changed their name, things like that. So after a while, I just quit working really hard to find people that chose not to be found. So that's one thing. And during COVID, I had been talking to the IAA about doing this, and there was a lot happening with the Alumni Association. There was changes taking place, and Up With People had gone off the road, and everything was kind of in turmoil. The whole flipping world's in turmoil, right? And I just decided that I wanted to do this because we give out Everyday Hero Awards, right? But people's stories are fascinating. And I wanted good news instead of bad news. I still do. Dang, there's a lot of bad news in the world. And I'm going to say, because you know her, the very first person I thought about was Roxanne Trump, which is random and weird. She traveled 1 year. She's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Is Miles' maiden name or married name?
Married name, Roxanne Trump Miles. Yeah. And part of the reason I thought about Roxanne is because she taught music in the inner city schools of Milwaukee for years. And she taught a lot of Up With People songs. And she's maybe a nobody in the grand scheme of Up With People, but she affected her community locally. And those are some of the stories that I wanted to hear. We get the Blanton Belks, we get awards, we get, some of the Jim McLennan Award. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's the Everyday Hero stuff. But there's a whole lot of people.
The Sam Lanham Award.
Sam Lanham Award, right. There are so many people who are alumni, 23,000 alumni, or 22,970 or something like that, around the world, who have made a huge impact either in their community or somewhere else. And those are the stories I want to share.
Gotcha. What's the feedback been like from the community? I'm sure some episodes are watched and listened to. I'm sure more people watch the Blanton episode than the episode of
I haven't interviewed Mr. Belk. I feel like I have to do that in person. No, that's okay. And I've chatted with one of his daughters about potentially doing that. But yeah, Paul Caldwell, Steve
and the Caldwells, yeah.
Clearly people know who they are, but maybe not as much from your generation unless they've been to a reunion, right? Because your writers were different people. And Carolyn Lee, tons of people watched hers because she's just well known in the community. When the Arizona band, when I interviewed 4 of them at the same time, that was great fun because people used to go to the DoubleTree here in Tucson and listen to them and dance and stuff when they.
So what's the feedback from the audience, or what are you
Well,
hearing?
I'm going to say that the feedback is growing and it's pretty good. It is predominantly those of us who are older. There's not near as many of you youngers, and I'm going to say anybody that traveled from 2000 on. You're at a different stage of your life. You're busy, you're getting married, raising kids, doing all those things. And I don't know whether it's fair to say you're not as interested in the history, or
I think that's I think that's personal. I think some people are and some are not. But
okay. Yeah, that could be. But certainly there are some people who watch every single episode and comment on it, and other people who comment on the ones they know, the people they know, their friends.
right.
Things like, yeah. So,
All right.
yeah.
What are you doing nowadays? What is life
like
after?
drinking coffee?
Life after Up with People, life years later, and how it helps you, how it's helped you. What do you do for work?
So I am a residential real estate agent in Tucson, and we moved here back to Tucson from Ohio in the year 2000. Caleb, we were in 8th grade, right? Going into 8th?
Going into.
Yep. And Adam was a junior, I think. And your dad wanted to come back to where he grew up. So that's what brought us here. I did a few other things, always wanted to be in real estate, started in real estate in 2005 when the market was crazy. And now I'm on my 18th year of doing it. And it's fascinated. It's allowed me to travel. It's allowed me to do things that I couldn't have done when I was just working as an admin for a financial planner, kind of thing. So, and I've sold homes for cast members of mine, children of theirs, friends of yours, single women. I'm a single woman, right? So sometimes single women need help.
Right. And Herb Allen.
and Herbie Allen,
right? Like you've used this organization to truly supplement part of your life.
Yeah. And to be fair, Caleb, you know this about your mom. I put all sorts of nonsense online, and people either read my nonsense or they don't. There's no requirement. But I have learned that if you're vulnerable, people connect. And sometimes 100%. There's a shared story that you would have had no idea about. So, yeah.
How much time we got here? I can't see the clock.
Well, I haven't seen, it hasn't gone to the 10-minute mark yet. So we're still good.
Okay. So I'm looking at your questions here.
Okay.
What would life have been if you had not joined Up with People? What do you think you would have done?
Oh, Lordy, that is really a weird question.
So you grew up in Ohio, you joined Up with People, you ended up living in Tucson like so many people did because of Up with People. You went to the U of A.
Yeah.
You then moved back to Ohio, where I grew up, and then went back to Arizona because Dad was from Arizona. Yeah. So back and forth, right? But very much you went to the U of A because of Up with People. So what do you think you would have been doing? What?
I think about this because I'm still.
I wouldn't exist.
That's true. You, Caleb Reed, would not exist.
Right.
Yeah. I think that in theory, I could have married a farmer. I think that I was dating someone before I met your dad.
But I can't imagine you just.
I know. So I go back to Ohio. I go to this festival. The people that were my babysitters, that were your babysitters or whatever, I love seeing that group of people. And yet I can't imagine living in that little town anymore. There would have to be some huge reason. And with my parents being deceased makes, kind of no sense. But it's interesting to think about, could that or would that have been my life? Or would I, even if in Ohio, wound up in like a Columbus or a Cleveland or a little bit bigger city, just to have the experiences that a little bit bigger cities have. Not New York, not Chicago. Yeah,
not Chicago. I was going to say, I could see you in Chicago.
I love visiting Chicago. I love visiting.
I mean, Tucson's getting very big also.
I know, but not like Phoenix, not
What
like,
is what is Tucson to you now versus 40 years ago, 45 years ago? How
oh,
does it
geez.
feel? That's I'm just adding questions here, but
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
is Tucson like for you as opposed to in 1976, 77, 78?
Well, in 1976, my first host family, for those of you that know Tucson, was on South Mission Road. He was a hydrologist. I didn't even know why they would have hydrologists in Tucson,
Is that
frankly.
South Tucson? Is
Yeah,
that like
yeah,
below the highway? Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's down kind of near where you would go to Star Pass and stuff.
Okay.
They're totally rural. Orange Grove Road, people were just starting to build up here. Yeah, I know
Wow.
where you grew up.
Yep.
And then think about your dad having lived here, as a kid and stuff and how it's
Homes
grown.
that were like expansive, not farms, but large land spaces that
Correct.
become
Yeah.
communities that are built up wall to wall almost.
Yep. And I like when I interviewed Jessica Rojas this morning, we talked about the fact that there's a guy at my office named Jesse Rojas, and they did mariachi together. So it's still a million plus people with some of those weird connections, still kind of the small town thing, which is kind of amazing. And I think that that's why I like it. I can do a lot of things. I can go to Phoenix if I want, but I come home to a place that's just a little bit more comfortable for me. So
For people not from Arizona, Phoenix has become a place where it's a 45-minute drive across the city, an hour drive, going 80. Like,
yeah, the 101, the 202, the 303, it's just like when your Uncle Rich lived there, I told him he lived in like East California because it's
yeah,
close.
it's gigantic.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so we haven't, oh man, I feel bad. I feel like I should be stretching for time. We have 40 minutes on your Zoom meeting.
It's all right. Yeah.
Um,
Go
anything
ahead.
you want to share that you haven't shared?
Only that I often ask people what they think about the new program or how they feel
Oh yeah,
about the
great
future,
question.
that kind of thing. And the truth, boy, I've got a lot of ums. I wish I could edit all of the ums out, but I never edit these. uh, I I just want Up With People to still have a chance. I still think it's viable, whatever form it's in. It's never going to be what it was when I traveled. It's not going to be what it was when you traveled, right? It doesn't lessen the value. In fact, to me, it increases the value because they are
Adaptation.
yes, it's exactly, they're working to adapt to the current times. And when you think about you did 6 months, right? And then we had to decide to do a year. And some of those people overlapped and some of them didn't. And these guys are doing 3 months and they're staying in a place regionally. So will some of those kids go on to the next 3 months? I don't know. But from what I can see that what they're doing, they're still doing great things. And I talked to someone the other day whose daughter is super excited about interviewing for the future. She's 17 or 18 years old.
Does it
And
feel like 2002 when the doors closed the first time? Does it have a similar emotional weight or does it feel different?
uh, I think it feels different to me at that point. Everybody had moved to Denver. All these people had their jobs up there, and that had changed in the 90s and the early 2000s. I think there are people who are comparing what they're doing now to World Smart, whether or not it's a fair comparison, not sure. I feel like anytime you travel with a group of young people and you serve in a community and you sing or dance or learn culture, whatever it is you do, it's good for you. it,
Yep.
it kind of doesn't matter the format. And these guys are working on capstone projects and stuff. That's great.
You mean for university? Like
Yeah,
they're getting
and
college
just
credit for capstone
finish.
stuff.
Some of them I think are, but just to learn, I got the 10-minute thing here, Caleb.
Yeah.
I I don't even know all the details. I just know that they've got a great crew and they've got young people super working and a driven CEO, and I hope it succeeds. I think we don't know. We don't know what it will be, but we can't make it what it was. So
Right.
yeah.
We talked a lot about on the road the concept of there are ways to travel and do community service. I mean, the Peace Corps has existed for a long time, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But this other idea that music and host families are so important to what this is that differentiates it from other programs, where it's music brings people together, host families teach you to love people like on a ground level, right?
Mhm.
Um, the turning faces and the places into faces is
Places.
repeated over and over.
Yeah.
Um, I think if Up With People manages to keep some of that in its design, whatever that is, I
Mhm.
think that'll be the tie that binds it to previous generations, even though different. Where I hope music is always part of it a little bit, and I hope host families have to be a part of it, right? Like I'm
Some
sure
way, some way
there
or
have been
another.
some way or another. There have been experiences. I know there have been casts who had to stay in a hotel because it was. I know they didn't stay with host families in Cuba in 2015, or right,
Okay.
like their experiences where they stay in a donated place or something. But that experience feels so important to the core of what this is.
Yeah. Yeah. I know they're working on that because
Yep,
post-COVID, that's a big thing, right?
it's hard. I can't imagine that challenge.
Caleb, I want to throw this in at the end, and I'm going to ask you just because it
Are you interviewing me now? You
I'm now
switched?
interviewing you related to this because of my relationship, my long-term relationship with friends. You're getting married soon, and several of your friends are coming from other places. And so tell me from your perspective how 10 years later those relationships matter to you.
Um, there's two different sets of relationships. I
Okay.
moved to Denver, and there are
Yep.
people in Denver that have become I see them twice a week friends. Even if they weren't part of my cast, my castmate introduced me to someone else who I now rock climb with all the time, right? So on the very like day-to-day level, I talk to Up With People castmates every single day in Denver, via text, and I see them at least once a week. Right. I play Dungeons and Dragons once a week with my castmates, or I do theater in Denver, and I've performed. I was in a musical with Ken Least, and then I was in a musical with my castmate Abby, and like there's a lot of overlap of my day-to-day life due to shared interests. The castmates internationally, we just had our 10-year reunion, and my cast opted to do an event in Denver in Colorado instead of going to Phoenix. Some of that was due to money. You commented on people having kids or trying to get their experience worth. Um, I'll admit that I was one of the ones who was sad. I like going to Arizona. I like the reunions. Um, but it was wonderful. We had like 30 people show up from all over the world and come to the mountains in Colorado, and we spent the weekend together and we all cooked for each other, and it it was wonderful. And some of those are people I haven't spoken to in 10 years. I'm not best friends with every person I traveled with, just like nobody is. But it definitely rekindled certain relationships, and I have friends who are coming to my wedding in a couple weeks
Yep.
from all over the world, and I can't imagine them not being there. They're people that man, social media gets a bad rap, but social media has made some of this really easy and good to stay in contact.
Mhm.
Um, I have I have friends in Norway and Belgium that I talk to all the time.
Yeah,
Philippines
when you
regularly.
tell me that, I always am like, oh my God. Yeah, you're like, oh, I talked to him yesterday.
I text Norway every day, right? Or every
Wow.
other day. Even if it's just commenting on a photo, it it makes relationships immediate instead of constantly trying to catch up. I don't need to catch up because I know what you're doing. So when we see each other in person, it's creating new memories, not just reminiscing. And I think that can't be overlooked for a wonderful, like, expediting of instead of spending a weekend reminiscing, you spend an hour catching up, spend an hour, and then it's new. It's we're still friends, not we were friends. And I think that's great. Um, and I can't imagine some of these people
No.
not being in my life regularly.
I I also think yeah, I remember talking to Jessica about it as a non-alumni that the
My
time
fiance is not an alumni.
Yeah, that the time would come when you would have had enough new experiences, that it wouldn't always be, remember when we did this in that place. And you can make jokes about it because I
Well,
know.
and that's been the most effective in Denver. The people in
Yes.
Denver, the people from a different country or state, yeah, we're still doing that a bit. It's still
Yeah.
Jessica still feels like she's attending someone else's high school reunion. And that's
Yeah.
fair.
That's fair. Every spouse feels that for a really long time.
But
Yeah.
but then on the same end, I said I went to a concert a couple months ago, and Dave Penny was at the same concert, and it's Dave and I are not best friends, but he was my cast manager from the office, and I saw Dave, and we talked about music, and it's like that's great.
Yeah.
The people in the same place, it's a different challenge versus if I lived in Antarctica and had no castmates locally, it would have a whole different relationship.
Lindsay, Ohio.
Or Lindsay, Ohio.
Yeah. Well, and that reunion that we went to in Sweden, where we were all generations. I mean, it introduced you
What was
to
that? Kara Nyquist from 84? 84?
84. Yeah, that was the 84
There's
group,
like
and
1,000 people there
felt like it.
for
But
Midsummer.
all the common link, whether you were 60 or the 12-year-old kid or whatever.
Mhm.
That yeah.
Right. So we got a couple minutes here. Anything you want to wrap up on? If you could say one thing to people who might be watching, what would you want everyone to know about how this gap year or years prepared you for life? That's your final
I
question here.
Yeah. I think that I've said it before, that it changed my world. I don't know that I could have said that at that moment. However, I believe that we can all think that we're not prejudiced until we're in a situation. We can think that we know a lot of stuff until we're put there. And that until we live it and experience, you can read everything you want in a book. You can make all these opinions in the world. But at the end of the day, the going, the being, the doing, and the sharing is what teaches you empathy and to realize that we're all just human beings trying to do the best we can. So.
Gotcha. Well, from everyone who's not you, thank you for doing this. It's very much feels kind of like a living journal, a memory, a record of people and places, and it is appreciated. If your goal was to put some positivity out there that happens to highlight this one thing that we all share, you're doing so, and that's wonderful. And I'm sorry as your son that I don't watch more. But I know it's there, and I know I can. And I know that in 50 years, if I want to watch you, I can, and that's very special to me. But also everyone else here who might just chime in or pop in to watch the one episode about their friend, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Sammy was great." Like it's appreciated, and I think people are going to come back and look at these randomly.
I think so. Yeah.
Do you have a YouTube playlist or anything like that that you can share where all of them are listed?
The YouTube channel, the Cactus Lounge, yeah, they're all there. This will be the 50th one. So
Okay,
yeah.
just making sure.
Yeah, I do.
Awesome.
All right, son. Thanks
for doing this.
Thank you. I love you. Have a good day.
Love you. Everyone else have a great day. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.